I think my view of John, this is entirely impromptu, so bear with me. My view of John was a bit tainted by some, he tended to polarize people, let's just put it that way. And one of my mentors was not a big fan of John, and so that I think kind of colored my perspective. But I did have enough interaction with him to get the sense that he was a complex individual, and he had a lot of positive effect on people, and I really respect that. The other thing that he was very honest about himself. And he was honest about himself in a way that gave room for other people to be honest about themselves. And one thing that I really appreciate about this conference is that it's a very, I don't know, like it's a very real conference. It's a very personal conference, you know, with the stories, you know, like lots of very personal stories, and I hear about the personal effect that he's had on people. And so it got me thinking that there were a few very small instances where his real humanity shined through. So how are we doing with this? Yes, okay, good. His humanity really shined through, and one way in which it shined through, which was a bit humbling for him, but also a nice role model, was he would say repeatedly, I have Asperger's. I don't always understand everything. I have trouble with whatever, you know. And Asperger's syndrome, for those who are not familiar, it's now called a more mild version of autism spectrum disorder. And he was happy to talk about that at the time. And he was happy to talk about the effect that it had on his life. And I'm beginning to see that in my family and in my community that there are people who have neurodiversity. There are separately, not the same thing, people who have mental health struggles, including myself. And I have over the years, you know, differing degrees. And one thing that John did very publicly on Facebook, when a mutual colleague of ours, a friend of ours, colleague of ours, I won't say who it is, said, you know, you don't need, you know, the best medicine for depression is to just go out in nature. You know, medicine is not right for treating anxiety or depression. You know, all you need is nature. And John tore him a new one. And it was great because he was saying, look, some people need medication. You can't tell a diabetic not to take insulin. And you can't tell someone who struggles with anxiety or with severe depression, even moderate depression, not to take the medication that is letting them live their lives. And he always stood up for that. And he always stood up for the human process of just living. You know, not just doing research or being a scientist, but just living. And I really respected him for that. And it's coming together now, seeing all the stories, that his influence in this area. And that really stood out for me. And I just wanted to mention that as something that he stood up for himself, the neurodiversity, acknowledging his own struggles, and also making room for other people to have struggles. And also talking about mental health struggles and the fact that treatment is not something to be ashamed of. It's something that a lot of people do. We don't always talk about it because, you don't always talk about your health conditions. But I think it's an important thing to normalize for the community because there are struggles that people have and those struggles are okay. And it doesn't mean that you can't be a scientist and be really good at what you do just because you have these struggles. And I think he stood up for that. And I wanted to mention that. Thank you. And on a lighter note, I also wanted to say that it depends on which version of English. In British English, you can hyphenate an adverb modifier. I learned that the hard way when arguing with Joe Fitzsimmons. Thanks.